Hi guys, so I wasn't going to make this video in the first place. Honestly, I've been trying to rant less recently and keep feedback either positive or at least neutral and focused on the more major issues. But by popular request from you guys, here we are. I need a drink. Oh. Not sponsored, by the way. That'll be the day. In case you hadn't heard yet, which I hope is impossible and that the community's response to this has at least been loud enough to reach all of my audience, the German aviation tree is going to be receiving an F-4 Phantom. I know, finally, right? Except for this one little caveat. It's not a tech tree vehicle, it's an event reward for a crafting event. This video is brought to you by supporters like you. Thanks for keeping the IRS away. Because YouTubers everywhere have to pay tax to the US now. So before you get mad at me for not doing my research and just jumping on the hate train, yes, Germany will be getting a Tech Tree Phantom in the next major update. Devlogs for that update should start to drop near the end of this event, so you're not waiting long. Why Gaijin chose to shoot themselves in the foot by announcing this as an event first, knowing for sure it would piss players off, and then including a little disclaimer that it would also be a Tech Tree vehicle too, is beyond me. But that isn't the point. If Germany's receiving an F-4 Phantom, I personally have little problem with at this point. Neither the Phantom nor the MiG-21 are really new anymore, so even though Germany receiving both is double dipping from both sides of effectively two competing nations, let's face it, all our anger for that kind of thing got neatly transitioned over to China when that ball of fun dropped. That's neither problem either. The Luftwaffe operated F-4 Phantoms for multiple decades. In fact, they were only retired about 10 years ago after serving since the 70s and being upgraded multiple times, so they were always going to be a part of the game. Initial variants were pretty subpar, using only basic aim-9 sidewinders, the same ones you find on the German F-104, and no sparrows, as the guidance radar, or illuminator, was stripped out of the aircraft before it was exported to Germany by the US. Besides that, this is an F-4E, although it doesn't get the flare and chaff countermeasures that the American or Japanese models get. So being overpowered also isn't the problem. So what is the problem then? Well, there's three, along with some misinformation being thrown around which I want to take this chance to clear up. For one, this is effectively another top BR vehicle you can buy your way to on day one, even though it won't be a premium, at least not if the history of these events is anything to go by. The top reward vehicles don't get premium status. Thing is, the whole problem with so-called top tier premiums, as far as Gaijin sees it, that they'd earn an unfairly high amount of SL and RP, is not the actual problem with top tier premiums, at least not as we the players see it. Both this vehicle and the Leopard 2 PL embody the issues with top tier premiums, even though they themselves aren't premium vehicles. Being able to buy your way into top tier matches mean you skip grinding your way up, and this allows vastly underprepared players to get into the highest tier of gameplay, where the lack of that experience grinding your way up gets them killed and results in Gaijin's balancing, which primarily relies on win rate and KD and other average player performance statistics. Well, obviously that average is heavily skewed, and balance becomes that much worse. When it came to the Leopard 2 PL, this seemed like a cheap way to balance the Leopard 2A6, which is the best 10.7 MBT by a wide metric. That in itself raises a large red flag, being that Gaijin's definition of balanced isn't that vehicles are evenly matched up against each other at their BR, it's that vehicles are winning and losing a roughly equal number of their games, and earning a roughly equal number of SL and RP. However, you have to artificially bump those numbers up or down. When it comes to the F-4F though, either this is a cheap way to do the same thing to the MiG-21 BIST Su-17 combo, rather than actually changing the Air RP game mode to suit newer, more modern aircraft with more weapon systems, or it's a pure cash grab, either of which is very poor from Gaijin. That leads us neatly into our second major problem here, the fact that this aircraft is being added for an event. In my opinion, events like this are best suited to unique and interesting vehicles that otherwise may not have made it into the game, either because they wouldn't suit or be overly competitive in the meta, or because they were limited to one-offs or prototypes. Something like the Object 279 or VFW are good examples of this. Mainline vehicles like the F-4F, however, aren't good to have as event rewards for various reasons, especially when they're top tier. Now, Germany does kind of need a new top-tier jet, as the MiG-21 MF has been relatively outclassed by newer aircraft and missile systems, but that necessary new jet shouldn't be an event vehicle, and the F-4F shouldn't be that jet anyway. I'll explain in a moment. It also shouldn't be the Dornier Alpha jet, as I've seen some players suggest, because once again, that aircraft should be in the tech tree. If I were to select a new aircraft to be Germany's event reward, it'd be the Polki 2, an Argentine jet prototype comparable to the LA-15 or Mystère 2A, but it was designed by Kurt Tank, the German aircraft designer behind the Focke-Wulf 190 and Ta-152, and it was based on the Ta-183. It's something I've wanted to see in game for a long time actually, so let me know down below if you agree. Now, Gaijin have stated that the Germans will be getting an F-4F in the tech tree too, presumably with the next major update in March, but despite this, that's still the aircraft coming as an event jet before it arrives as a tech tree model, as a new top tier for Germany. Gaijin have also said that the tech tree variant will not be the ICE model, which, if you don't know, was the variant that carried AIM-9Ls and AIM-120B AMRAAM missiles during the mid-90s. The variants we are getting did not carry these missiles, could not carry these missiles, and actually only ever carried the AIM-9F, which we currently have on the German F-104G. It's an AIM-9B with an AIM-9E's seeker head, and it's pretty bad. In game, this is designated FGW2, it's the same thing. Either way, this aircraft did not carry AMRAAMs or later Sidewinders, and apparently our tech tree version will not be that aircraft either, just an improved version of the F-4F with the ability to carry air-to-ground missiles, which this event variant cannot. Now, this refers to the AGM-65 Maverick, so yes, Germany will receive Mavericks on their tech tree Phantom, something the US don't yet have, which strikes me as kind of unfair, at least give them to the F-4E at the same time. But this also means that when later jets come, something we talked about in our What's Next video, which you can find here, Germany will end up with a third variant of the F-4 Phantom, 2 in the tech tree including the F-4F ICE, plus this one which will be available for purchase on the marketplace. Given that Germany already received their third generation MiG-21 at the same time as the Russians did back in 2019, plus the better variant of the MiG-19 which the Russians still don't have for some reason, and will likely soon get an Su-17, perhaps a MiG-21 bis, and likely a MiG-23 when that comes for Russia. The idea that they also get a third F-4, including the best variant in the ICE, more than the British or Japanese will get, and potentially more, if not as many as the US will ever likely receive, all seems pretty unfair to me. Now, this would not be so much of an issue if it weren't for our third major problem here, and that is just how effective the F-4F will be, and why it's being given some special treatment. As I said, the F-4Fs only ever carried the AIM-9F or the FGW2 before the ICE got AIM-9L and AIM-120Bs in 1994. Gaijin, however, have elected to give the F-4F both AIM-9E and even AIM-9J missiles, which are currently the best air-to-air missiles in the game, at least on fixed-wing jets, despite the fact that it never carried them. In fact, it couldn't have carried them because West Germany never bought or operated either of these missile types, yet the F-4F is apparently going to get them when it comes. This is laughably inconsistent, given just how many aircraft lack missiles they actually did carry, which they could very well receive in-game. The F-4C operated the AIM-7E all the way through Vietnam, the AIM-7E2 entered service 5 years before our F-4E model did, which also should not be using bullpups but Mavericks instead, and the FG-1 and FGR-2 should both have received AIM-9Gs long ago, but have since been denied it. They are a small upgrade over AIM-9Ds, but it's an upgrade that matters, especially with Gaijin actually planning on nerfing the AIM-9D, and they carried them extensively. Now, as far as later missiles like the AIM-9L on the later Harrier models, Skyflash on the FGR-2, this is understandable that these aircraft don't have these weapon systems yet, as they may be too much to balance for now. But giving the F-4F missiles Germany never had, while simultaneously denying AIM-9Gs to the British Phantoms, which are sorely underperforming for 10.7 fighters, is just not on. Now, if you still think that these types of missiles like AIM-7E2s have been denied for balancing reasons, then allow me to point you towards the French F-100D Super Sabre, which sits at the same BR as the American one, yet lacks the AIM-9E missiles the American F-100D uses, because France never bought them. The aircraft is capable of them, it has the pylons to do it because it is literally just an American F-100D painted in French colours. But because France didn't import AIM-9Es, the French F-100 is at a disadvantage. Previously it sat at a lower BR to account for this, which was good, but then compression. The same should ring true for the German F-4 Phantom, as it is literally the same situation. It is capable of carrying the same missiles as on its US counterpart. As Gaijin says in defense of this, the F-4F has the wiring to do so, but that's because it is just an F-4E. It's not as if the wiring to fire AIM-9Js was a specific inclusion on this model, it just had that by happy accident because the pylons weren't changed. But if the fact that France didn't import AIM-9Es makes the French F-100 unable to receive them in game despite its being able to carry them if they had, why is the same standard not being applied to the German Phantom? Why is Germany getting special treatment here? I've heard two main reasons to excuse this, the first being that with only AIM-9Fs, the German Phantom would have to be a lower BR, which could be seen as unfair, or just be less competitive at a BR like 10.3. The second reason is money. Obviously, more hype for a more competitive vehicle means more money in Gaijin's pocket. But to answer both of these points, we're talking about an event vehicle here, it doesn't need to be competitive. Think about the Katyusha or the P-59. When it comes then to the tech tree F-4F, you might think my opinion would change, but no. Perhaps if Germany weren't receiving East German aircraft alongside West German, then I'd be able to let this slide, but while Germany does need a new top tier fighter, the F-4F doesn't need to be artificially buffed to take on that role. The MiG-21 best can fill that role. The Su-17, Germany could use these aircraft, they did, without needing this special treatment in order to artificially give them that competitiveness in top tier. As for the F-4Fs being less competitive, well, like the French Super Sabre, that's just a factor of the aircraft which you have to accept, because if we're not using real pros and cons and factors like that to represent these aircraft, at least somewhat authentically and believably, then what is the point? It is the fact that these vehicles are not all the same, are not all homogeneous, that makes them unique, forces you to treat them differently, and makes this game enjoyable. That level of authenticity where certain vehicles are subject to the different limitations they faced IRL is important, even though this game isn't realistic. It should also be said that giving the F-4F AIM-9Js doesn't make it easier to balance. It's still an F-4E, now an F-4E with AIM-9Js, but no flares, no chaff, no AIM-7 Sparrows, it's still not the same thing. Perhaps if Gaijin elected to allow this aircraft to use AIM-9Es only and place it at 10.3 as a more manoeuvrable comparator to the F-4C without Sparrows, I'd be more inclined to forgive the inconsistency, though it still seems both unfair and unnecessary. But at the moment I strongly believe that neither this event F-4F nor the tech tree F-4F should receive missiles they could never have carried, because Germany never had them. If we're going to rely on the idea that it could have carried them, then when is the F-100D and the French tree going to get AIM-9Es? In fact, if we're using this as a basis, well, it is a very important feature of modern NATO tanks that all their ammunition is standardized to be cross-compatible. So when are the M1A2 Abrams and Leclerc going to receive DM-53 to help balance out the dominant Leopard 2A6? In my opinion, if you're okay with the F-4F receiving AIM-9Js, then you can't be against these things happening. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time this level of inconsistency has happened. Take for example the F-86K Sabredog or the G91R3. In these cases, the nations that developed both of those aircraft, America and Italy respectively, do not have access to them in their tech trees, because they themselves never operated those jets. It's the standard rule that if the nation that operated the vehicle is a nation in-game, then that nation gets the vehicle, right? Even if another nation designed it, as in the case of the F-86K, F-104G, G91R3, and some of the early Chinese stuff. If however the nation that used the vehicle is not represented in-game, like with the Canadian Leopard C2, Polish Leopard 2PL, or Argentine TAM, then it will go to the nation which developed and built it instead. In this case, Germany. If neither are represented, then a vehicle goes to the nation with the strongest ties to it, like with the Markovas in the US, the IAR-81 for Italy, the Moko Moran, Fokker D21 or Pyramyski for Sweden, Australian and South African vehicles for Britain, and the SK-105 for France and Germany. But this doesn't always seem to ring true. For example, Germany received the Class 3P prototype for what would become the Roycat, even though a South African branch within the British territory was obviously well on the way, effectively meaning that, like the G91R3 or F86K Saberdog, the Class 3P should have gone to the nation who used it, which is a nation represented with a tech tree in-game. If you still think that's a little open to interpretation, after all, the tree is still called Great Britain and represented by the British flag, then explain to me why the T-18 Boarhound, a vehicle manufactured by America purely for export to Britain with no plans for America to ever use it, and used by British forces during the North African campaign, still came to the American and not the British tree. Of course, I am cherry picking from examples here, but it seems as though this inconsistency almost always favours Germany, and if the F-4F comes to War Thunder with missiles it never carried purely because maybe it could have a situation not replicated for other nations, I am going to be very disappointed, as will many in the community. After all, having polled my audience, more people would rather see Germany be denied the Phantom entirely due to their already receiving its main rival, the MiG-21, and likely the Su-17 and MiG-23 in future too, than receive multiple Phantoms with weapons they never carried, as an artificial buff which is unnecessary. Hopefully this community response causes Gaijin to reconsider and add the F-4F with only the weapons it really used, staying true to what has been a rule for other nations to help distinguish the vehicles in game and, in my opinion, make the game more enjoyable. Well lads, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, share it around to hopefully get Gaijin's attention before the F-4F arrives, and support the channel to help us keep pushing out content for you. If you have any different opinions on this topic, then let me know down in the comments, or come chat with us on Twitch. Come War Thunder's April Fool's event, we are going to be starting a 24-hour live stream over on Twitch, link will be below, I hope to see you all there. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you lads on the battlefield. I can turn tight enough in here? Nah. Ah, yes, yes.